Welcome into Mock Trial Masterclass Deep Dive. I'm Luke Worsham, and this is the series where we spend a little bit longer than we normally would on a topic that is important for you all to control the courtroom. And I couldn't be more thrilled because in today's episode, we're going to be going over a topic that is very tricky, oftentimes to nail down in mock trial, and that's being a witness on cross-examination. You know, in your direct examination, everything is so prepared. It's so scripted. You know the flow of the questions and the answers. And then cross happens, and what do? Because you don't know what's coming your way. And so to help us answer that question and give us some tangible insights today, I couldn't be more thrilled to have back on the show Simeon Lawrence from Notre Dame Mock Trial. Man, thanks so much for hopping on.
Hey, thank you for having me again. I know our last time we got to talk about witnessing, something that me and you both love, something that I used to do. And I'm in my third year with Notre Dame. You know, we got our A team going to nationals, so super excited about that. But right now, I'm super excited about this conversation. So ready to talk about these witnesses.
So where I want to start is this, because I feel like most of the problems with witnesses on cross, it's less, oh, you didn't rise to the level you were supposed to, as it is, oh, you sunk to this level that was really bad. So before we get started with the conversation as a whole, I would love for you to just answer this. What are the biggest mistakes that witnesses make on cross-examination and mock trial? When you're watching around as a coach and you see blank happen, what is it that gets you really frustrated?
I got to say, from the very start, if that witness is less responsive or less friendly immediately with that crossing attorney, that always puts a little sour taste in my mouth, because this jury just watched you go from yes to this, and oh no, that happened, and you're getting all these different responses, and then that attorney stands up and says good morning, and then you're just like, oh, good morning. What about this? Oh, no. You know, and you give that kind of tone. You don't want to do that immediately. You have to let them earn your defense in a way, right? So you want to end with however you ended that direct. This is a new person right here. This person hasn't offended you yet. Even if you're the defendant, they haven't offended you yet, right? Unless they're jumping in with something crazy, which we sometimes see, not all the time.
Yeah.
We sometimes see it. Don't be super defensive to start. That would be the first thing that I would say bugs me a little bit.
And that's such a great segue into where I want to go with this, because one of my favorite quotes from Justin Bernstein and David Nelmark's book, Championship Mock Trial, which I highly recommend, it's a great book, is they say that a witness's job on cross-examination is three things. Right? You have to minimize the impact of bad facts, you have to remain credible, and you have to stay in character. And what I want to do for this conversation, Simeon, is I just want to break each of those three things down to a really granular level and talk about what does it mean to do each of those three. And I want to start with minimizing the impact of bad facts, because to me, that is a really hard thing to do. On one end of the spectrum, you have the ping pong game of correct. I remember during a round at our district competition this year, one of our other coaches was texting me. He's like, I can't stand this cross. It's just correct, right? So that's one end of the spectrum. And then the other end of the spectrum is I'm going to over-explain every answer and talk just to run the clock and just to, I guess, make myself feel better. It's a very hard balance, though, to strike right out of the gate. What is your framework? What do you teach your students for finding that balance?
So the first balance when it comes to minimizing that bad fact, like you said, you got to bring it up on direct, right? So if the jury knows about it before this attorney has the chance to hammer you on it, it's going to help. Now, you don't want to spend your entire direct giving all your bad stuff away, hoping to get in front of it. But the really hard stuff, let's tell the jury about it first. So that's the first step. The second step is after you have that conversation on direct with the jury, you're able to use words like, well, like I said before, or well, yes, you know, when he just asked me about that, or when he or she just asked me about that.
Yeah.
You're able to switch up some of your vocabulary so it's not stuck with the, oh, yeah, you're right. Yep, you got me there. You could switch it up a little bit more with saying like, hey, like I said before this, or Yeah, I mean, yes, but like the last person came up, I'm only here to do this. You're able to use some of that vocab, but at the same
Hmm.
time, you have to have humanity with it. So when you have bad facts, depending on how bad they are, depending on your wiggle room, when you eat it, have the humanity with it too. Because a lot of times that cross examiner is not expecting you to fess up to something that doesn't totally destroy your character, but it says that you did something bad in the past. If you say,
Hmm.
yes, that was something that happened, and I'm changed now. That's something that the jury's going to respect because they know in
Yeah.
the case that there's something in there that you really can't wiggle around. But the fact that you're just eating it and getting past it, it might help minimize that major effect.
So, is there a rule of thumb in your book? And I love the idea of the soft cross, right? Of asking about these things on direct examination to sort of prevent that blow. But for the things that inevitably you're going to get asked about, a police officer who did an investigation where they didn't find the murder weapon, is there a level to which you say, all right, that requires an explanation and let's think about this in practice and how we're going to answer it versus, you know what, if we just say, yeah, that's right, it almost kind of draws attention away from it as opposed to maybe we explain it and it makes it seem like a bigger deal than it is.
Exactly. So I feel like when it comes to something really, really bad, you can't wiggle away from it. The attorney's going to approach that in a multiple question layout, right? So
Yeah.
it's not going to be, you did this really bad thing, and then you can explain it. It's going to be a
Mm-hmm.
buildup where, as the witness, oh man, here we go. We're getting to that part. So if
Yeah.
you're going to use that ping pongy correct, when he gets to that third part, when he or she gets to that third part, that's when you want to give your explanation. You don't want to give it every time. You don't want
Mm-hmm.
to give it to them and then expect that person to immediately move on. You know what they're going to get at. So if you're going to give the yes, that's correct, that's this, that's that, do it on the build up. But
Hmm.
once they get to that major punch, give your explanation there. It's going to seem so much more human. It's going to seem so much more natural. If you're
Mm-hmm.
over explaining immediately, the jury's going to know, like, okay, this person knows this thing's coming. And then
Yeah.
as that crosser attorney goes on and they get to it, the jury is going to say, oh, that's why this whole pocket this person was fighting the whole time. There were three major things that came out here, and this person fought on every single one. And we didn't see that the entire time with the direct.
So then what are the hallmarks of a good explanation? What makes you sound extra credible and what makes you sound kind of guilty?
I would say the human side of it is you're going to want to explain softly. And if you explain softly, you'll be able to end with more of a this is what I'm saying. So I get a bad fact. Hey, that murder weapon was found in your car and your DNA prints were on it.
Yeah.
You start soft like, I understand that is what they found. But I'm telling you right now, I was not the person who killed that person. That was not me. You enter it soft because you're not going to be immediately defensive. Say, well, I wasn't the person that hurt that person, but
Yeah.
I understand that they found it. Because then you're giving it up at the end a little bit. You're kind of
Mm-hmm.
fessing up towards the end of it. You want to fess up at the beginning and then end with a statement, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the right cadence to have when it comes to where you're inevitably cornered, to answer it right.
Something that I think is really hard for students to understand in high school and college as witnesses is that it's not your job to win the case. What would you say to a student who is struggling to internalize that, where maybe we talk about it in practice, like it's not your job to win the case. You have the facts you have, you just got to answer the questions, and they say, okay. And then we get into the round and everything is, well, you see, and well, actually. I mean, what do you say to that student?
What I would say to that student is in AMTA, where all of your amazing high school students are going to be one day, it's a 10-point scoring system, right? You have 10 points on your direct, you have 10 points on your
Mm-hmm.
cross, and then both the attorneys have a chance to have 10 points. That's it. That's what you're responsible for is your 10 points. Your goal is how can I make this direct? How can I fight this cross with the best ability to get
Yeah.
10 points, right? It's not about how can I deal with this theory? How can I help with the closing? Do your performance because Oftentimes, and you'll see it a lot, and it bugs a lot of people, a lot of attorney heavy people with that team's theory made no sense. That made no sense, but they won the case. That witness was amazing on cross, and that witness was had a great direct.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the facts didn't all align the way that you would see in a real case, the performances were good. That's why we see theater kids being so well when it comes to mock trial, because a lot of
Mm-hmm.
them understand that it's about your 10-point performance, 20 points actually, and that's your contribution.
Yeah. So then, when you were a witness in college and you were on the witness stand, I guess two questions with this. First of all, how much preparation went into cross for you in terms of maybe even scripting cross answers? And then number two, when you're on the stand, what is that light switch like for you internally on, I'm just going to take this one on the chin and say, yep, that's right, and let us move on, versus I need to step in and give a little bit of context here?
I think the prep with cross, and it seems super basic, you gotta read the affidavit. I
Mm-hmm.
tell my kids that you could never read the affidavit enough. If you're a defense witness and you get to sit through the whole entire P-side before it gets to you, you should read the affidavit the whole time. You don't need to read your script because you already got that down. We got that
Yeah.
memorized. Read the affidavit, because here's the thing. Attorneys have to worry about openings. They have to worry about closings. A lot of times they're prepping multiple crosses.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing your affidavit fully is going to give you that advantage when it comes to cross. Because unfortunately, unless you're a really, really good attorney, you're not as into the affidavit as that witness that you're crossing will be. So that's the first thing, is read the affidavit. The second thing, you have to record these rounds. We're seeing it a lot. Are you able to record in high school mock trial? Any
Yeah.
round?
Most tournaments, well, so at nationals, for example, you have to sign a form saying you're good to be recorded in any round. And
Oh,
then
perfect.
I think it probably varies state to state. I know that in Tennessee, unless the team submits written notice in advance, every round is able to be recorded.
Okay, perfect. See, so watching the film is number one. You'll never see, and I consider mock trial a sport because that's how much time we dedicate to this
Oh
activity.
yeah, oh yeah,
You'll never see any person who's good at a sport say that they don't watch the film. If you're in
absolutely.
a team activity, you have to watch the film. You have to learn from it, because you're going to get different crosses. From
Mm-hmm.
those different crosses that you do, and this is something that we implement at Notre Dame, is we write down what that attorney's cross was. And then instead of our attorneys giving their prepared cross for this witness in the next tournament or match, we're using a cross that we just heard. Oh, well,
Oh,
when you run into 8 different teams at the start of the
that's
year, guess
great.
what? You got 4 different crosses you could run. You can
Yeah.
mix the questions around, and then you'll kind of cover all the different questions you'll be able to get. And then, of course, it's a team thing. So,
Well, I'm glad you pointed that out, because a trap that frankly we have fallen into in the past is, all right, we're leading up to the tournament. We're going to practice cross by running our cross over and over and over again. And I finally got to the point where I'm like, these students aren't going to face that cross. They're going to face one they've never heard before.
yep, and that's what we ran into with the orcs, because I mean, we had a witness in this case that was like a survivor betrayal matchup,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we had the host of Survivor, 3-page affidavit, not a lot of bad facts, but you get to orcs and then it's an 8-minute cross with demonstratives. It's like,
Uh
well,
huh.
we didn't think that could happen. That's
Yeah.
why it's so important to hear what other teams are thinking, because as small as some of these cases are, the brains of people in mock trial, they're going to come up with different crosses, different directs.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So then touch on that second issue of when you're on the witness stand, how are you deciding when to go and when to just kind of retreat?
Right. So I think this is 100% based on the attorney's tone at the time
Hmm.
and what point in the cross you're at. Right. So in the beginning, right? In the very beginning, you want to be friendlier. Right.
Yeah.
So there's not going to be many questions you're going to get in the first pocket that's going to really be a reason to be defensive. But the
Mm-hmm.
good thing is you're showing the jury a different reaction both times, right? A lot of times juries only see one reaction on a witness the entire time of cross,
Yeah.
right? That's what we want to stray away from, because on direct, You have happy moments, you have sad moments, you have action moments, you might have funny moments. You give the jury all these different perspectives of you. You get to cross in your one way. So we have to find different ways to show the jury our different personalities in different range of being a witness. So you want to start happy, right? When they get to some of those hard hitting questions, then you want to have some confusion in there. Well, I mean, yeah, you have a point there. And then when they have those questions where,
Mm-hmm.
okay, now I'm coming at your character. Now I'm coming at our ability to trust you. That's when you give them that third personality where it's like, oh no, that's not it, right? So you just have to find your range. And usually, when you get to the part where you're really standing up for yourself and you're really hitting hard back at your cross,
Yeah.
you can't return from that, right? So you want to get those other two perspectives out first
Yeah.
because then you can't be happy to end the cross after it, you know.
Well, and what you just demonstrated is the effect that tone of voice can have on an answer. Because, let's say there's an expert on the witness stand. Okay. Well, as part of your investigation, sir, you did not such and such. Okay. One option is, no, but you see, that was not necessary. Option two is, no. Right? They both
Mhm.
said the same thing. But the
Exactly.
first one used words and sounded defensive, and the second one made it sound like the attorney doesn't know what he's talking about or she's talking about.
Exactly. It's all about the tone. It's all about the eyebrows. Those tell a lot of things too. It's
Yeah.
about what you do with your mouth. There's so many different things that give you those nonverbal cues and verbal cues that get the point across, right? Just like you said there, those are two different versions of no, but we got two different effects from it. So, yeah, just like that.
Let's move into part two. We started with minimizing the impact of bad facts. I want to talk about remaining credible next. To me, the biggest thing you can do as a witness on cross to instantly lose your credibility is get impeached. Now, there's more that goes into it than just simply not getting impeached, and we'll go over that stuff too. But I want to start here because to me, that's my thing where I have to leave the room. And my students who are watching this know that. They know that Coach Luke is out the moment someone gets impeached because he just can't take it anymore. But the reason is, from my perspective, there's just no reason it should ever happen. Because you can tell as a witness when it's coming, right? They get that tone of voice. They reach for the affidavit. It's your testimony today. And you have two options when you're in that spot. You either let it happen or you back off. Take me through, back when you were competing, how did you make sure that you never got impeached?
Oh, you got to know the affidavit front and back. And the
Mm-hmm.
thing about avoiding an impeachment is when you're in round and that attorney's watching you indirect and they're writing their notes, they're gonna tell if you're a good witness already, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have those cues that they pick up, like, okay, this person knows their stuff a little bit. But as a witness, the way you could show that attorney, and it actually brings a lot of fear in a lot of attorneys, is you throw in uh something very minimal, but it shows that you know your stuff, like a date, right? So if something happened minimal, like yeah, on October 4th of 2022, I reached
Mm-hmm.
out to the defendant and said this, and say you have a bunch of different conversations throughout that affidavit. If there's a point in cross that you're able to say, right, well, that was a conversation I had October 4th of 22. Yeah, that's when we talked about this. It's going to show that attorney like, ooh, that's a lot of information just for that small
Yeah.
thing that person knew. So that's going to kind of show your wittiness. And you're only going to get that by reading that affidavit, right? So that's the first part. The second part is when an impeachment is going to happen, you have to know in your head that this is either a home run or I have a possibility of hurting my team with losing these points. The home run comes if that attorney's impeaching you on something that they're not aware of, because that's when you get to correct the attorney. That's when your attorney gets to stand up and object. That's the moment where you really show your knowledge of the case and how good of a competitor you are. The other side is you get impeached and you show all the opposite, right? So as
Yeah.
a witness, you really have to know whether, am I right on this? Or am I not right? And you don't want to swing not knowing. If you don't
Mm-hmm.
know, assume they're right and you have to learn from it. Because there's plenty of times that, an attorney's getting ready to impeach and I see some of my witnesses, they give in because they don't know the affidavit. And then after the round, they
Yeah.
come up and say, you could have got that one. You could have got it.
So then let's say you're in that position because, the pressure of the moment can make you lose your mind and you're like, was it green? Was it blue? I don't remember.
Right.
So let's say you're in that moment. You can clearly tell that your crossing attorney is heading in that direction and you decide, yeah, I'm not going to swing the bat. I'm not going to try to hit a home run. I just want to kind of not go through this. How do you stop it before it gets to be too big?
Right. So, if you're ready to back out in that moment, that's when you have to remind the jury that I'm sorry, I'm human. You have to remind them that, okay, yeah, I mean, you might be right about that thing, honestly. It's different when you're an expert. As an expert, it'd be harder to give that up.
Yeah.
But for any other character defendant, you're able to have that human aspect where we hear some of these dates in mock trial and we know it because we're reading the affidavit all the time. But to a normal person, it'd be hard for me to say, hey, what'd you do on March 7th of 2026? That wasn't too long ago, but it would take me a minute. I might agree with somebody if they said, well, no, you went and got gas that day. Then you got you know what? Yeah, you're probably right. I probably did. It seems more human than fighting, and then giving up. You have to give that humanity a little.
I've often said it's best if you can just say, oh, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Or I'm sorry, I must have misunderstood the question. What I meant was, and then give them, what they were looking for, and then we move on.
That's great too.
What happens when you, on cross-examination, get asked a question that prompts you to go outside the problem, basically that prompts you to invent fact?
So you get asked a question that makes you have to invent fact.
Like, let's say this. Let's say that you have a case where this witness is on the witness stand and they said, and right after the shooting, I heard one of the busboys say, oh, someone just ran away wearing an orange scarf, okay? And then you get up on cross and you ask that witness, so what was that busboy's name? Typically, you wouldn't ask that question, right? Because it's an open-ended question. It causes you to go outside the problem. But maybe what you're really doing is you're trying to highlight a weakness in the case of the fact that, it's not in the problem. This witness can't name the person who said that. That's kind of weird. What do you do if you get something like that?
Yeah, so in that situation, you get asked the question. I mean, always have a witty answer to it, right? Really read the question. The person asks, hey, what was that person's name, right? You can kind of say, I didn't know their name. And I didn't know the butler either, but this thing was happening and it was pretty crazy. You have to find the same thing with the human thing, right?
Yeah.
You have to find a way to make it, I wasn't checking that out. Even with watches. Well, what time did that thing happen at? Something where if you just say, I don't know, that's going to sound worse than what time did that happen? I wasn't looking at my watch at the time. There was a lot of stuff going on. I didn't happen to look. There's a way that you can explain it that is less harmful for you as a witness.
And what you're demonstrating right now is just acting, right?
Yes.
Because I think so many people associate acting with witnesses as, I've got to give this very hammy performance, this very drama school, theater camp thing. And that's where witnesses can just be intolerable. But what you just did, that's actual acting, is I'm going to appear as if I'm a real person on the stand getting asked this question that within the four walls, I don't know the answer to. And hey, maybe they did open the door, but if I make something up, I'm going to get impeached. So I have to take it on the chin, but do it in a credible way.
Yes, it has to be credible. And that's the thing. When it comes to theater and when it comes to acting, I lean more towards watch the acting, because when we watch people acting, they're acting like normal people. As hard as they're trying to do it, they act like normal people. And that's what we as people watch all the time. So we like watching a show that acts like us in the best way possible. So when you're on that witness stand, try to do the same thing when you get asked some of those harmful questions.
Now, another thing that I've seen teams do is utilize micro impeachments as a strategy in cross-examination. They ask these uber specific questions that students who have read the witness statement a million times, they're not going to remember, was it very black or mostly black? These really specific things. and it becomes this kind of shtick of the cross. And you talk to scorers, and some of them just kind of see through that, and they're like, "Yeah, you're not really accomplishing it." But other scorers will sit there and go, "Wow, this guy's really in command." And how do you
Mhm.
navigate a team that's kind of their whole strategy?
Um, Man, that's tough because like you said, you have different judges who view it a different way. Some see it as while you're controlling the witness, holding them to the affidavit the entire time. Others
Mm-hmm.
will see it as you described. I would say in that moment, when they're really nitpicking on different items, I would say you got to give it to them sometimes, right? You got to give
Yeah.
it to them, and you have to allow them to kind of look like the jerk in the room, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if they're nitpicking on, well, yeah, it was, I think it was dark outside. They were like, no, you would say that it was light or it wasn't dark outside. You'd be like, yeah, yeah. I mean that's how I describe it, sure. And if they keep hitting you with those different things, you sometimes have to say, well, if that's what I said when I wrote the affidavit, then yes, then you got it, right? You kind of have to give it to them, and you have to make yourself kind of look like the person who's along for this little ride that they're trying to take
Yeah.
you on and let them kind of hurt their own image.
So when it comes to this topic of remaining credible, one thing that I try to make happen every year at the beginning of the season is I give my students, my witnesses, a do not say list. I give them a
Mm,
list of phrases and I say, you need to eradicate these from your vocabulary because they
okay.
will make your score go down. I'm asking you, off the top of your head, what would be your do not say list for cross?
Oh man, I got a few. Let me see. Do not say list. Um,
I'll share some of mine while you're thinking. One of my big ones is I didn't think it was necessary. Right?
ooh,
An expert. Well, you didn't in your investigation, whatever. I didn't think it was necessary. Surely there's a better explanation than that.
mhm.
Or, but you didn't put that in your witness statement. Well, I didn't think it was necessary. Right? It's always a loss when you use that phrase. Another
Yes.
was I try to get my students to go from saying yes, but to saying yes, and. Yes, but makes it sound like you're fighting the attorney. Yes, and makes it
Mhm,
sound like you're agreeing and just adding extra context. Those are
mhm.
two of my big ones. I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I mean, you really don't see this too often, but um, asking to be reminded with your affidavit where the attorney brings it up to you
Mm,
like, oh no, yeah, or if the attorney says, well, yeah, would you like some clarity on that, and you
yeah.
agree to it, that I don't want to see that. I don't want to see
No,
the attorney
no.
helping you out on the stand. um I don't want to see, let's see, you're probably right. I would not want to hear that either.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
like saying,
Cringe.
yeah, you're probably right. It's just like, no, you have to know that thing.
Yeah.
Or you have to just say, yes. You can't say, yeah, you might be right about, you don't want to hear that.
Hmm.
Um, Let me think. And then I'd say for my third, I can't remember. That's what I would say. Yeah. If
Yeah.
you say you can't remember, that is also a big no-no,
Well,
right?
you immediately lose control because then the attorney goes, well, here, let me remind you, right?
Exactly. Right. So I think those are my biggest things, just because I think it equals a slam dunk for
Yeah.
the attorney.
It's also
Because
anything sassy too. Like
Mhm.
I explain this in my book where it's like cross examination is not a dunking contest where we're going back and forth. Like that's not what this is. And so if you're trying to like roast the attorney or get one up on that, like that's not the point.
Yeah, it never is. And that's the thing, you really never see that work on an attorney. Like, for example, and oh, if she sees this, I'm not gonna name drop. But one of my students this year, she had a cross that didn't really go her way. And at the end of the cross, she complimented the attorney's shoes. Right. And it's like, hmm. In that moment, I have the conversation like, hey, we're looking to score tens, right? How
Yeah.
can we get to tens? What do we have to say to get to tens, right? Say you did really, really well on the cross. It's very clear to everybody in the room, like, wow, you just did your thing
Hmm.
as a witness and you won the cross. And then you say, nice shoes. It seems like you're kind of kicking down on them a little bit, right? Now
Yeah.
let's reverse it. Say you didn't do well on cross. The person kicked your butt. And then you say, nice shoes. it doesn't go well either, right?
No, no.
So those are certain things that when you're thinking about the point system and credibility, let's stay in the things that get us closer.
Yeah, I've encountered. So when I was in college crossing a witness, I stood up to do the cross. And as I'm walking to the well, the witness goes, who's playing like an actress character, she goes, anyone ever tell you you look like George Clooney? As I'm walking out there. And then just 2 weeks ago at our Tennessee State competition with my team that I coach now, one of our attorneys gets up and same kind of thing. The witness was like, anybody ever told you you just have a smooth, nice presence or something like that? And I'm like, what are we trying to accomplish with this? It's like catching the attorney off guard. And what was so funny is Drew, the attorney that this happened to a few weeks ago, she said the thing like, anybody ever told you you have such a calm, nice presence? He looks kind of off to the distance, and then as if he was genuinely flattered, goes, "Thank you," and then proceeds into his cross. Oh, it was fantastic. It was perfect.
Okay. I like it. I will say when it comes to that, and if you're in mock trial, you're going to see it, whether it's on the opening to your cross or whether it's when you're sitting back down.
Yeah.
The thing that I see that works the best for me, and this is something that Chris Grant did a lot, is he would make it more serious. He'd kind of take the air out of the room. So he would get a compliment or he would get a witness that says something snarky in a way to him. And he'd be like, I appreciate that, but we're here to talk about a murder case. So things are going to be a little more serious here.
Woo!
Juries eat it up a little bit. It's just like, oh, there we go.
Yeah.
What do you have to say? And it's kind of, as
That's
a witness,
great.
When you hear it, it kind of puts the spotlight back on you. Like, yeah, we're in court right now. What are you doing? So as an attorney, I'd say that's what I would do.
So we've talked about minimizing the impact of bad facts. We've talked about remaining credible. Next, I want to hop into staying in character. And you're the master of that. And I can't wait to get your thoughts on this. First, I want to remind everyone that my book, Mock Trial Masterclass, is and has been available on Amazon. It's the guide that so many schools around the country have been using as a guide for attorneys and witnesses. It's a great way to dig into mock trial and learn everything you need to know to succeed. And if you want to pick up a copy, there will be a link in the description or the show notes if you're listening on a podcast platform. Simeon, what I think would be helpful for this section is to go through each type of witness, because I think staying in character looks different for every type of witness. And let's start with a more dramatic witness, or a main character, as I would maybe call them. This is your plaintiff in a lawsuit, your defendant in a murder trial, the victim of a crime where the victim didn't die, right? That main character who's going to have a dramatic arc, who has some stakes in the case. What does remaining credible on cross look like for that type of witness?
Remaining credible on cross, you're still going to have those three prongs that I talked about before. You want to have that normal interaction to start. You want to have those different tone changes throughout, and you want to show your different range throughout, right? So the same range that you had on your direct, where you enter introducing yourself, making yourself a human, you enter into the bad facts and you have to get emotional and back yourself up. You end with a somber tone to enter into cross. That's the same way that we want to approach that cross, so that we remain the same amount of credibility that we just earned from our direct. So when we're that main character, we want to enter it with, yes, I'm in court, nice to talk to you. Here comes the tough questions. The tough questions come. You want to not fight immediately, but you want to give them a little bit to go with. Yeah, you might agree to some things, but then you have your one point that you really want to stand on, and then you bring that point up. The biggest part with remaining credible is don't show the jury something that they didn't see already when it comes to being a witness, right? So if you're going to get angry about something, you're going to get angry about that same thing when it's brought up on direct too. We've seen this before, so let's make sure that we keep the same flow that we had with the direct through and through.
What about a character witness? Your kind of middle part, the witness where there's not a lot of substance. And so you make up for that by creating an engaging, often funny character for them. That type of witness, how do you remain credible on cross?
Oh, man. I think a character witness is the greatest thing you could ever be in mock trial. But when it comes to that, you got to prep your cross the same way that you prep your direct. You know certain questions you're going to get. make
Yeah.
sure that you have a witty answer to it, right? So for this year, we had a part where our witness, who was a character, had to agree that the defendant looked very nervous at the time, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
could get, she's a country witness, right? You can get, hey, and that person seemed nervous at the time, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
You could say, yeah, she seemed nervous. Attorney wins, right? What we had her do is say, okay, when they ask you about the nervousness, what's a country saying that we could find, right? That's just gonna,
Yeah.
in our Midwest area, make people's ears perk up. We love country people here. So what we had is a long-tailed dog in a room full of rocking chairs, right? So we're
Oh,
prepping that.
that's great.
We're
Yeah.
prepping that for the cross. We know we're going to get asked about nervousness, but let's make a joke about it that gets us closer to the 10 while still
Yeah.
giving the attorney what they want. So, and she looked nervous at the time. Oh yeah, I mean, she was nervous as a long-tailed dog in a room full of rocking chairs. She was real nervous. You gave
Yeah.
it up, but you
Well,
get more points.
and what that does is, yeah, your points go up. But what I've noticed is that if you can have a great or even just a good, joke line in response to a big cross point, it sucks the life out of the question.
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't do that with like the main fact of the case. It's like, and that's when you saw the bloody dead body, right? Probably not the time to make a joke.
Mm.
But, any questions about bias, for example, are great opportunity. Well, you're actually best friends with the defendant. Well, I could see the same kind of thing. Closer than two, whatever, right?
Exactly. It's just you have to know when it's coming because as a character, you have the range to do it. You're just
Mm-hmm.
there. You're just there to talk about it. So, like you just said, yeah, we're closer than two peas in a pod. But I would never lie about it. You end
Mm-hmm.
with that somber part, but you give
Yeah.
it to them to start. But you get, as a character, you can give it to them in however way you want. Have
Yeah.
fun with it.
So with experts, I feel like it's a tough line to walk because you can very easily look like the most knowledgeable person in the room and you're teaching us and oh how great. And then on the other hand, you can look like a overly corrective snob who is holding the attorney to a ridiculous level of detail. How do you find that balance and remain in character, remain credible as an expert?
As an expert, I feel like you have to have that runoff, right? Because as an expert, when the jury's watching it, yes, you have that credibility that you just built on direct. But if you're answering yes, no, no, you're right, when it comes to that cross, that's when you really
Hmm.
lose that credibility. I feel
Yeah.
like as an expert, you have more range
Hmm.
to give back on the case that you built or your exact testimony that you have in that case. Your
Yeah.
report that you have, that's yours, right? So I feel like the jury respects an expert that can push back a little more than the other witnesses that a mock trial case gives you. But you just have to have that thing that you could always fall back on, that your
Mm-hmm.
attorney knows, okay, my witness is going to fall back on this. Like, yes, you're right about that. But, in the report, it showed this, and that's why we think it's that. Your attorney and you have to have that rapport where they know when to stand up and object to asked and answered.
Yeah.
Because as an expert, you're going to have that sole thing in your report that you could lean back on and hold your ground. Even when they're throwing the bad facts, you're answering yes and you're holding your ground back.
Yeah.
And then the attorney can help you out if it gets too far.
So then I think that's an important point because each of these types of witnesses, and we've still got one more I want to talk about, but each of these types of witnesses has different levels of license to explain, I think, as they're trying to remain in character. A dramatic witness, if you're a defendant in a murder trial, you've got natural emotional stakes in this. You're not just going to sit there and take it on the chin. No, you're not going to every question, well, actually, right? Because then you're not going to seem credible. But you've got skin in the game. You have some wiggle room there. And then these experts, it's almost like a superpower, your ability to be intellectual and academic and explain these things and hold the attorney to the specifics of the case. Character witnesses, frankly, don't have nearly the license of the other two. And that's where I think trouble comes up sometimes is these character witnesses trying to fight off everything and they just look kind of guilty more than anything else.
Exactly. Like if you're a character witness and you're just there giving your story, you should be more incentivized to not give any reason to fight, right? Because
Yeah.
That's where you got to just think about your performance, your character. You're not thinking about the theory. You're in reality. You're not even hearing the
Hmm.
case in chief. You don't know what's going on. You're just there to talk about your stuff. So
Yeah.
as a character, give it up. Expert, you have a little room to fight. A defendant, you have emotional stakes. When you fight, you do it like a human who's actually fighting.
Well, and that all goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of it's not your job to win the case.
Hmm. Exactly. Exactly.
So there's a fourth type of witness here, and it's police officers. Some
Ooh.
people lump them in with experts. Some people say that maybe in a criminal trial, they're more like the main character. They did the investigation, they're the one telling the story. I've even played police officers before as characters. They can kind of go any direction, but your typical police officer, let's say it's not a character, they're not trying to be funny, they're just kind of there to tell the facts and be a credible police officer. What's the wiggle room like with that type of witness?
When it comes to a police officer, I think the biggest thing to lean on is that wasn't a part of my investigation, or my duties don't cover that portion of the investigation.
Mm,
As a normal person and as all the normal people who are watching mock trial, we don't tend to know every level of policing, every level
yeah.
of the investigation of things. We have a report from this cop and we're watching it in a mock trial competition. I think we naturally in mock trial have the room to just say, oh, that was this other shadow group that had to do that thing, or oh, that was this that had to do this thing. And the
Yeah.
jury's not going to fight too much. So if it's
Mm,
like, hey, you didn't run this analysis, you didn't ask to speak to that person's counselor. Well, in my job capacity, I wasn't just,
mm-hmm.
I'm not supposed to speak to counselors. That's a different function or whatever. If they say, well, what function is it? Then you have an open-ended question and run off and have fun.
Yeah.
But as a police officer, I think your wiggle room with fighting is how much you know your affidavit, as well as what can you get away with and what can't you. If there's
Mm,
a major hole in your investigation that you didn't look at, we could always look at, as my favorite closing attorney who did it, the key theory. Like if you find like your car keys, if you when you're looking for your keys and you find your keys, why do you keep looking? Right. So as a police officer, well, when
yeah.
we found what we were looking for, we stopped looking. That's something that you could lean on when they ask about these different holes in your case.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have a lot more room to fight than characters, but less with experts. I think as a cop, you also have to think,
Yeah.
hey, I'm giving my side. That's it. There's not major stakes for you.
And I think, too, the verbosity of your explanations, how long they are, how many words you're using, I
Mhm.
think that plays into it a lot with police officers because, we had a police officer this year where they were often getting asked, well, you didn't look into whether the defendant owned a gun. And we're sitting there in practice thinking, like, what person goes, all right, I'm going to commit a murder. I'm going to go to Dick's Sporting Goods, fill out the paperwork for this gun, let everyone know on record that I'm buying this weapon. I'm going to go shoot someone with it. I'm going to leave it at the scene. Therefore, it can be
Sure.
tied back to me. We were like, I can't imagine that ever occurs. And so we kind of scripted this response out of like, well, you can't tell us whether the defendant even had the paperwork to own a gun. And the judge is like, and the person was like, I have never encountered that in a murder investigation. Right? Just like these very logical responses to these questions. What do you think
Right.
about that?
Yes, yeah, I think logical explanations are great, and you could just lean on what your report entailed. Like in your
Mm-hmm.
direct, you're giving them your different degrees that you have and how long you've been doing the job that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout that whole time frame, if you've never done the thing that they're asking you about, you could lean on that's not my job capacity.
Yeah.
It's not going to look as bad as it might sound when you're doing it.
So here's what I would love to do in the time we have left. We've talked about a lot of strategy and tactics on how to do this well. And I've been taking notes. I have a legal pad off to my right here. I've been taking notes the whole time. I can't wait to share this with my students.
Awesome.
I want to walk through a cross together. So I have pulled up a cross that our team used this past season on a police officer, incidentally. And I want to just walk it through. And I'm not going to cross you because you don't know the facts of this witness, but I'm going to read through this cross And I want you to stop me when you have a thought and you're like, oh, if I was the witness, I would really want to think about this. I would want to know more about this. Just for us to see your thought process as someone who has been there and done that at a very high level.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. So this is Detective Riley Paris, who was the lead investigator in a homicide that took place. Someone got shot behind a restaurant, and there may or may not have been organized crime connections. So Here's the cross. Question 1, Detective Paris, you're aware that Johnny Malone was a member of the Corsino family. The Corsino family is an organized crime network. An organized crime network is a group of people who engage in illegal activity for profit. And then there's a bit of a laundry list there. You can't give us a number for how many other people are involved with the Corsino crime family, or a number for how many people at all are enemies with these people, or how many people were enemies of the decedent, Johnny Malone. Where are you taking that line of questioning as a witness? The key point there kind of being, well, sure, you're trying to pin it on the defendant as, oh, they were mad at this person, but who knows how other many people were mad at this guy.
Right. As the detective in that case, when they're asking those questions, you weren't aware of the other enemies of this person. No, I can't give you a number, but that wasn't the main point of our investigation. We had the evidence of X, Y, and Z. That's why we looked into them. Right. So then the next question, you can't tell us how many enemies of the other person. Then the witness can work right back to what he just said. No, I can't give you that number. But like I said before, the evidence was this, and that's what led us to Y. This is why, this is what X happened. This would lead us to Y. So the same thing I was speaking about with the expert, with the detective, you could lean back on your main facts up to why you looked at the person and try to ignore the question entirely.
So this next section is going to highlight more, quote unquote, problems with you and your investigation. I'm really curious what you think about some of this. So you can also admit you found no physical evidence connecting the defendant to this shooting. You searched for fingerprints. You found no fingerprints. You searched for DNA. You found no DNA. You searched for bullet shell casings. You found no shell casings. You also found no murder weapon. Well, what caliber of weapon did the shooter use? Spoiler alert, you don't know, right? How are you handling a line of questions like that is really brutal in pointing out real flaws in this investigation?
Right. So as this detective, you're knowing, like if this is the cadence, if you know that you guys didn't do all of that kind of stuff, then you need to attack it on the first one that they bring, right? So if you didn't get fingerprints, you didn't get shell casings, you didn't get these different evidences. If it says that in your report and you know that it's coming, let's try to beat the attorney to it. So when they first say, and you know what, you didn't find any fingerprints, did you? No, like I said before on direct, we couldn't find fingerprints, shell casings, calibers, but what really led us to our decision was this thing, because you're going to have that thing that made you catch the person.
Yeah.
Beat them to it, right? Because we're going to see that as a detective who's a witness, you're going to have a point where it's like, hey, this one thing, they're going to rattle off about 7 different answers through it. If you beat them to it on the first one, then they're going to hit, right. So you would admit that you didn't find X, 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 and X. That sounds a lot easier than that spread across 8 different questions.
Yeah, it's taking the laundry list and not letting them get all the way through it. I love that.
Oh, yeah. You got to beat them to it.
How do you decide within a segment of that? Let's say they do go through the laundry list. What do you fight on? What do you not? What do you just take on the chin?
Right. So fingerprints, right? You have to give examples of the reality of it, right? We know of all the murder mysteries that we see, if you can't find fingerprints, who knows who did it? We throw our hands up, we give up, right? That's not how it works, right? There's other things that we're going to look for. There's other things that any person who's watching a mock trial event knows that police are going to look for, where it's like, oh, you couldn't find shell casings, but they can still catch the person. Oh, you didn't find fingerprints, but you can still catch the person. So in these moments, we got to remind the jury that, like, we didn't find fingerprints, but if that's what we needed to solve a case, there would be a lot of unsolved cases. So we found other methods to be able to, find our number one suspect without needing this one thing. That one thing is helpful. We didn't have it in this case, but we still got the job done. Be realistic.
Yeah. So this next section of the cross is dealing more with specific problems with you as this detective. One of the big problems in this case was it was kind of the main defense argument was the prosecution basically decided, oh, it's got to be that guy, and then did an investigation to try to pin it on that person. And you will see some of that come out here. So question one, from the beginning of this investigation, you had your sights set on the defendant. Obviously, well, such and such. Well, let's talk about that. Right after the shooting, you began interviewing witnesses. One of those witnesses was a security technician. He told you he saw a person running away moments after the shooting. And then you had a meeting with that person. And when you had a meeting with that person, before you even talked to him, you had a picture of the defendant in your coat pocket, which is true and a horrendous fact to deal with. When you've got something like that, we're just like, man, that's awful. What do you do?
Right. So that's tough. In the pocket. I tell you what, people who write these cases, they are not friendly, are they? In that case, you have a bad fact. As the detectives, they're whatever you want to call it, negligence of handling a witness to a murder like that. I would say eat it, but also give an example of how that really didn't affect whatever happened, right? So it's a realistic mistake. You're like, yes, I did have that, but I have no reason to believe that affected their ability to identify X, Y, and Z. Be realistic. Like, hey, when that person walked in, well, that's over explaining. But
it's tough. It's tough. We ran into the same
give
thing.
Examples of, right? Yeah, you could over explain a little bit. So you really have to find your common ground, and you have to know that this is coming. If that was something that was in the case, I would hope that the team had some proactive thought on how we're going to fight it. But I would say you fight it with, it didn't affect the main thing. The main thing, say the main thing, even though that happened at the end of the day.
So with a bad fact like that for a fact you're going to get asked about, it's not objectionable, it's going to happen. Is that something that you would script a response to?
100%. You have to. Because, as we were saying before, you have so many different crosses that you see throughout the country. When it comes to that major thing, there's going to be a common denominator that all teams want to go for. Yeah. So you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't script a perfect response to it in preparation for that question, because you're going to get it.
So the final section of this cross is more of the same, just kind of problems with this investigation and with this police officer. So 2 days after the shooting, you asked to meet with the defendant. The defendant agreed. She came down to the police station. You asked her questions. She answered your questions. She was polite. She was composed. She was cooperative. But at some point during this interview, you looked at the defendant and said, "You're going down for this murder."
You're going down for this murder. Gotcha.
Now, I can tell you what we came up with as a response to this, and it still wasn't great. Well, I want to hear you first.
Okay. Well, what I would say is, yes, at that moment, we had enough I would hope at this moment you had enough facts, but at that moment, we had enough facts where, let me ask, was the defendant, were they arrested immediately after this conversation?
Pretty soon after, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So I would say at that moment, we had enough evidence that, we were confirmed that this was the person we were going to arrest. So yes, I did say that. And I would think that, we all are humans, but we do look at people who hurt other people in a certain way. So if this person is guilty, cool. The cop said that works. Yeah. If they're not, then he's a jerk.
I like that where you didn't go was, yes. And now that I think about it, I regret saying a thing like that. Like it's just the most disingenuous thing ever. That has about as much credibility as the redirect of an expert who just got crossed on their bias, and we come back around and we say, but Dr. Whoever, did you let any of that affect your investigation? Well, no, I did not. Well, that settles it, folks, right? Both of those are in the exact same vein in my mind.
I agree. Man.
So what we came up with for that was we kind of thought maybe she's just trying to, maybe it's an interrogation tactic. So we had our witness who played this part. She's very, very composed, very, very, owned the room. And she was just kind of like, yes, intimidation is a very common interrogation technique. And that's what I was utilizing in that moment. And even hearing it, we were in the moment like, I don't know if I really like that. But it's still like that fact was just so bad. I don't know where else you go with it, really,
I know. I think when you mention that the intimidation is interrogation.
It doesn't sound great, does it?
Yeah, it's like that's why you have a lawyer when you talk to cops. Like
yeah,
you're telling us why. I mean, it depends on your jury. It depends on your jury, and depends on that witness's portrayal and if they like that witness. But I think if you lean on, I'm right? The detective in a case who made a report, he firmly believes he got the right person.
Yeah.
If you lean on that, it kind of takes away like the mindset of, oh, I had to be nice to this person. No, you can be a jerk because this person murdered somebody. So in that instance, you can kind of stand on your ground. You said you're going down for the murder. Yes, I did. I did. We had enough evidence at that time where she was going down for the murder. It kind of, okay, detective, that's how you talk.
Yeah,
I think
exactly. Last question for you, Simeon. As we wrap up everything that we've talked about today, if there was one thing you would hope the person listening to this podcast who's about to go play a witness and get crossed, if there's one thing you hope they take away, what do you think it is? Think about that for a second. I'll give you mine, which is just reiterating it's not your job to win the case, right? Your job is not to fight back against every bad fact. Your job is exactly what we talked about. Remain in character, stay credible, and minimize the impact of bad facts. Don't eliminate the bad facts. Don't explain them completely away. But those are your jobs. It's not your job to win the case.
I agree. And I'm going to be kind of similar to yours, too. Right? You say don't win the case. I'm going to say look for the 10 points on cross every time. That's all you're responsible for is those 10 points. So whatever comes out of your mouth throughout that entire examination, I want in the back of your head 10 points. If I answer this way, is this better for the case? Don't think about that. If I answer this way, is this going to help my closer to bring that up? Don't think about that. If I answer this way, is this going to get me closer to 10 points? If I answer this way, is it going to get me lower to that 1 point? Think on that scale. Let the attorneys do their thing. Think on your scale and watch the points come in.
I love it. Simeon, thanks so much for hopping on. This has been valuable to me, and I know it's going to be valuable to so many students who are listening to this too.
I'm going to continue to have my kids watch your podcast and YouTube and read your book. So thank you so much for having me on, and I hope they watch this episode too.